Alright, we are back with a new video, and today we'll be updating the power rankings for Survivor 42 following the premiere. And I'll say up front that this was a pretty interesting premiere from an edit standpoint. I feel like it was fairly balanced in that most of the people got a decent amount of content throughout it. Although I do feel like at the end of the day that some people's edits are being set up for a win more so than others, so I'm going to be going through that. And like I said, I'll be ranking each of the players based on how likely I think it is that they'll win the game based on their edit as well as current game position. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the list. So starting out the list at number 18, we have the first boot of the season. We have Jackson. And this was a bit of a surprise for me. I wasn't expecting Jackson to quite go out like this. But obviously in the premiere, he comes out as transgender to his tribe, has a confessional that leads to an intro package about his transition and how his family slowly accepted him. And then obviously we get to the scene where Jeff pulls him aside at camp. It turns out that Jackson didn't disclose some medical information until the last minute, particularly that he was taking a lithium based medication for sleep purposes. Again, he opens up about the issue, particularly how he's concerned about being stigmatized, not just through his medication, but also through the fact that he is transgender. And then Jeff then says that the show and the medication would have an adverse effect on his health, and through that he is medevaced. And overall, I like Jackson a lot on the season, and it was great getting to hear his story about transitioning and then his family getting to accept him. I was pretty low on him preseason. I didn't feel like he had the strategic chops to really make the moves necessary to position himself accordingly. Even so, I wasn't anticipating him to go out in this way with him being medevaced. Now, I'm not sure how to assess him as a player, as we didn't get a clear idea of where he stood within the tribe. We did learn from exit interviews that he was close to Mariah, and he saw Marianne as a big threat due to her likability. However, it didn't seem like he was in the core majority group, or at least not based on what we saw. And again, it's sort of surprising to see him go out this way. He is the earliest medevac in the show's history, even beating out Courtney Moon and Pat Cusack, who at least made it to the first immunity challenge. Jackson didn't even make it there. And it was, again, pretty crazy to see him go out like this. However, I wasn't super high on him anyway in the preseason, and because of that, I'm here at number 18. Now we're moving on to number 17, and we have the second boot and the first vote out from a tribal council. We have Zach. And again, it's interesting seeing Zach go out here. I mean, obviously in the premiere, Jeff asks him what he'll take to win the game. He says, "We'll see," only for Jeff to ask him what he means. It's a pretty funny moment, and definitely one of the moments in which Jeff really undermines Zach early on. After the challenge, he talks about being a super fan and how this is a new era. He doesn't know what that'll happen, but he's ready to face what comes his way. Complains about how Roxroy has taken on the leader role. In a new era of the show, being the leader paints a target. Talks about liking Romeo and how they're both pretty similar. He bonds with Romeo over being a super fan. After the challenge, apologizes for losing the puzzle and expresses gratitude. Recognizes that Tori is throwing him under the bus. Talks to Tori about the vote. They agree that they are the main targets, and he hopes people assume she's been idol hunting. At Tribal, uses his shot in the dark. Also has that moment where Jeff has him say the line about fire representing your life, which, again, kind of undermined him to a certain degree. And obviously him using the shot in the dark was a pretty telltale sign that he was probably going to be voted out. And sure enough, he is voted out unanimously, as in literally unanimously. And overall, the premiere was a pretty fun arc, sort of rise and fall for Zach, with him being the super fan that was in over his head. Jeff seemed to pick on him quite a bit, which wasn't a great look for him in the grand scheme of things. And while we see him connect with Romeo, it's clear by the end that Romeo was siding more with the Drea side of things. We see him try to flip things on Drea by getting Tori, Swati, and Romeo on his side, but it wasn't very effective. And admittedly, I was a bit too high on him preseason. I recognized that he was high variance and that he could have been an early boot, but I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I felt like he could have skated by through those early rounds. Maybe Romeo was the one that blew up his game, and through that he could have potentially found a way in and possibly get a deeper run. However, it seems like I was wrong at that end. It seems like Romeo is doing the more effective job at insulating himself, and Zach never really got his footing. And again, it's sort of, I know I had him a bit high on my preseason power rankings. I was wrong about Zach, but still, he was a pretty fun character to have on the show, and because of that, he's here at number 17. And with that, we are now moving to the 16 people still in the game, and like I said, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think it is that they'll win, based on their edit and current game position. But at number 16, the person I think is the least likely to win from this point is Tori. And again, this was a bit of a rocky premiere for Tori, where she does get a bit of content here and there, but she's definitely being presented negatively. She has a confessional about her telling people what she wants to think about them, lies about being a caregiver when she's really a therapist. She observes how different people are working around camp. She's determined to talk to everyone and pick up on what each person is like. She doesn't want to be with the big kids. She prefers to interact with people on the outs. Goes off, causing people to suspect she's idol hunting, admits in confessional that they may pick up on it, but still does it anyway, returns to camp only to notice that people are suspicious, has a confessional about how she feels like her game is crumbling. After the challenge, tries clearing the air to the whole tribe about her not having an idol, has a confessional about the need to not let that determine the game, and obviously she's spared when Zach is just the bigger target. And overall, I'm not feeling great about Tori. While we hear her perspective on the game and learn a bit about her background, I feel like most of the stuff she says is contradicted. She talks about how she can get people to perceive her however she wants, only for her to make others suspicious. She denies idol hunting to everyone, despite us knowing from confessional that she was idol hunting. And while she expresses confidence in building bonds with people, she doesn't seem well positioned at all. Apparently, her and Zach got along. However, when the vote was down to just the two of them, it was clear they had to turn on each other. And while she survives this vote, I wouldn't be surprised if she was the next target. And not helping matters is that it seems like she gets the beware advantage from Ica, meaning she probably won't have a vote unless the other advantages are found before she goes back to tribal. But I'm just not feeling great about her. I mean, like I said, her edit has just been all over the place. And while it seems like it's something that shows that she's aware of her faults, that she's in a pretty bad spot, and I don't feel like the show is really propping her up too much. So because of that, I have her here at number 16. Now we're moving on to number 15, and I'm not feeling too great about this person either. And here we have Jonathan. And I know I've been pretty low on Jonathan throughout the preseason, but I feel like now that we are seeing him on the show, like there's just not much there for his edit. I mean, in the premiere, he does have the first confessional, which is something. I mean, he says he lives for challenges like Survivor and mentions his world record. I mean, so that's something. During the Savvy Challenge, he has a confessional about how he's more of a physical guy than a mental guy. He then suggests half the tribe works on the shelter while the other half works on the Savvy Challenge. And aside from that, that's it for Jonathan. And overall, I'm just not feeling great. I mean, while he does get the first confessional of the season, it's not one that particularly jumps out to me. He talks about being bad at mental comps while being all about physicality, which probably isn't the best skill set to have, and certainly not how winners are usually presented. You'd think the winner would be presented as being well-rounded, and with Jonathan not seeming to fit that bill, like I can't have him too high based on that alone. That, and also he's definitely one of the more quiet people in the edit, and considering you would expect him to be a big character, the fact that he isn't getting that much screen time is a pretty big red flag for me. But the reason I have him above Tori is that I feel like he probably has a bit more longevity in the game than Tori. Like, while I think he could be voted out pre-merge, I mean, I think his challenge strength will definitely be an asset for the tribe moving forward, or at least in the short term, whereas I feel like Tori doesn't really offer much of anything to anyone. So because of that, I feel like he's in a slightly better game position, but neither of their edits are great, and because of that, I have Jonathan here at number 15. Now we're moving on to number 14, and we have the person who I think has the smallest edit so far, and here we have Mariah. And like I said, I feel like Mariah's edit has been smaller than Tori's or Jonathan's, even if it's not as negative as I feel like those two are. I mean, it's still not great if you're not getting any content. I mean, she says there's something out there for her to find, which is something, I guess. And then after the reward challenge, she has a confessional about losing it for the tribe. But aside from that, no content, no real, I guess, arc for her to redeem herself a bit. And overall, I don't feel great about Mariah either. She was probably the most invisible person in the premiere, as I said earlier. And we know that she was close to Jackson, but this wasn't featured on the show. And with Jackson gone now, that's probably not the best thing for her gameplay-wise. And while she gets a confessional in the intro, I don't find it that impactful at the end of the day. I can't really reward her too much, but again, at least it's not negativity in the same way that I feel about Tori and to a smaller extent Jonathan. So because of that, I have her here at number 14. Now we're moving on to number 13, and we have another person who got a relatively small edit and pretty underwhelming at the end of the day. We have Lindsay. And again, she's gotten a pretty small edit despite her being relevant to the story. In the premiere, she wonders how much potential she has, which again is just something. During the challenge, she, Drea, and Hai encounter a decision, and she has the choice of working with the others to get an advantage, which she ultimately agrees to. Is one of the three to work on the Savvy Challenge back at camp, along with Omar and Marion, and aside from that, no content. So overall, I was pretty underwhelmed by Lindsay's edit. She got the smallest edit of the people that received the amulets, which isn't the best sign, and aside from that, she got no personal content, leaving a pretty big hole. Now, it seems like she could be working with Marion and Omar due to them bonding over the Salvi challenge. However, that relationship hasn't really been established on the show. And again, while she has this potential a cross-tribal alliance slash rivalry with, again, the other people that got the amulet, again, she doesn't really get much screen time. She doesn't really have much opportunity to talk about her thoughts on it. Whereas I feel like the other people, Drea and Hai, got a bit more content to talk about the twists. So because of that, I'm not too impressed by Lindsay's edit, and I have her here at number 13. Now we're moving on to number 12, and I wish I could put this person higher, but their edit was just pretty lackluster at the end of the day, and here we have Chanel. And again, I saw Chanel as a pretty top contender coming into the season, and it is possible she could make a deep run, but I feel like so far her edit has just not been doing it for me, has not been giving me much confidence. In the premiere, she has a confessional about the importance of winning the Savvy Challenge, and has a confessional about how she and Daniel are left as a duo, and that's pretty much it for her as well. And overall, I was underwhelmed by Chanel's edit. Again, while she does talk about the Savvy Challenge, she isn't really in the forefront of actually completing it. Obviously, Jenny gets more of the credit for that. And again, while she does have that confessional laying out the dynamics of the Vati tribe, how it's these three duos and how she and Daniel are a duo, but even then, while that kind of is a relationship, I don't have the feeling that that is a super secure relationship. It just seems like it just sort of fell into her lap, where obviously the other four Avati members, got together naturally, and then she and Daniel were just left on their own. And it's like, well, I guess we have to work together to a degree. So again, I was pretty underwhelmed by that. It sort of implies that she's behind the eight ball with building relationships and being in the core power structure. So I'm not feeling too great about her at the end of the day. Plus, I feel like, again, her edit has been pretty underwhelming to this point. Not feeling great so far, and she's here at number 12. Now we're moving on to number 11. And again, we have another top contender I had from the preseason. I thought this person might have been a really strong contender, and I kind of wish I put this person a bit higher, but I couldn't really justify it. And we have Hai. And again, I mean, Hai definitely got some content here and there, but I was, again, kind of left underwhelmed. In the premiere, he mentions need to be aware of any twists during the intro. And obviously that leads into the challenge where he, Drea, and Lindsay encounter their decision. He has the choice of working with the others to get an advantage and obviously agrees to it. Has a confessional about how this allows him to immediately build a connection in the game, particularly with Drea and Lindsay. And later on, he has a confessional about finding out what the advantage is, particularly that it's the amulet. And he talks about the need to know about Drea and Lindsay in order to know how many amulets are still in the game and what power he'll get as a result. And through that, he mentions game theory and this aspect of voting people out in order to make his amulet more powerful. And overall, I am a bit interested by Hai's edit, but not to the point where he is a top contender. Most of his content comes from the twists and his involvement with the amulet, as well as him talking about the game implications, which is interesting. I mean, of the three to get their amulet, he has the most content talking about the game implications of it. Though admittedly, I don't love how he initially talks about the twist as a way to build bonds, only to later talk about possibly voting out those same people to strengthen the amulet. So it makes me worried that he may be too blinded by the strategic elements of it. Maybe, is a bit too willing to cut people to the point where maybe, people may not trust him later on. That's just me. I mean, I'm not feeling great about him in the sense that we don't really establish his personal relationships. I mean, outside the people that got the amulet. And like I said, we got no personal content either or anything that explores his relationships on the Vati tribe. It seems like all of it is related to game. And even then, like, you can argue that it's circumstantial and that he only gets this content because he's gotten these advantages and therefore he has the choice to potentially vote out Drea or Lindsay down the road to make the amulets more powerful. So I do feel like he may make a deep run as a result. I mean, he could make to the merge and be faced with that decision where either he's the one voting out one of them to make his amulet more powerful, or in turn, they pick up on the plan and then they blindside High in order to get around that. So, it's not looking too great for High at the end of the day. I mean, I feel like he probably isn't an early boot, but the fact that we don't really get too much about his relationships outside of him being in a duo with Lydia, but even then we don't really hear that from High himself, is enough to leave him here at number 11, not too high on the list. Now we're moving on to number 10, and we actually have someone I literally just mentioned, and here we have Lydia. And honestly, I'm not too sure what to make of Lydia right now. I mean, she definitely gets plenty of content in the premiere with her talking about being a young woman, part of Gen Z. She's never been out camping before. She says it's a weakness and that she's bad physically. After the challenge, she has a confessional about how crazy it was and how they've had setbacks. The next day, she talks about how she isn't crying anymore, but finds it more difficult than usual Survivor. And through that, High shares that he's close to her, so that's something at least. But aside from that, we don't hear anything else from them. And overall, Lydia feels like she'll definitely be a fun character this season, someone that's out of her element and is adapting. And through that, she could be set up for a relatively deep run. Even so, I'm not sure how much of this will actually translate into a season-long storyline. I feel like I have a lot of the same concerns about her that I did preseason, and in the sense that she could be a bit high variance, especially if High makes himself suspicious to other people, then they could go after, the High and Lydia duo. And through that, Lydia could potentially be going out first, or High potentially. So I'm not feeling too great about Lydia's game position for the time being. I will really have to see her in the next episode to see how much of this is just her being a fun character or how much of it is her being a strong contender. Again, I feel like I have a lot of the same concerns I had preseason with her. I'm not really sure what to make of her edits so far, so we'll really have to see. So, but for now, I decided that 10 was a good spot for her. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we have someone who's pretty similar to Lydia in my opinion, in that I'm not really sure what to make of their edit right now. And here we have Daniel, and again, I said this before, I like Daniel. He is someone I relate to, and he's someone who I'm very interested in seeing how he does. And so far, he's doing all right, I think. In the premiere, he says that he's been applying for a while during the intro, which leads to him like really participating during the challenge where he falls and says that he thinks he's dislocated his shoulder. Sure enough, he does. And after the challenge, the medical team examines him. And sure enough, they're able to get the shoulder back into place. And he really takes it like a champ, gets plenty of positivity there. Later on, he has a confessional about how he's built decent connections with his tribe, such as being with a duo with Chanel. Admits that he's surprised that his injury didn't destroy his game. He then opens up about how he survived leukemia as a child, leading into an intro package about, again, his journey through that. And overall, I feel all right about Daniel, as I said. While I wouldn't consider him a top contender, most of his content has been positive so far. He talks about applying for a while. He gets plenty of positivity with his shoulder injury, although you can say that was circumstantial. He obviously gets the intro package about surviving leukemia. Mind you, I'm not a huge fan of him telling the whole tribe that so early. I'm not really sure what to make of that so far. Makes me a bit worried that he could be seen as a threat later on, but not too worried about it for now. And then, of course, his relationship with Chanel, which is there. He does talk about it. But based on Chanel's confessional, I wonder how stable that really will be. Now, again, I still worry about his position if he ends up going to tribal. I mean, I'm not too sure who will actually get the majority in that situation. But based on the premiere, I think he was shown a decent light. So I do have some confidence that he can make it through. Certainly more confidence than Lydia, in my personal opinion. But still not entirely clear, and I wouldn't be surprised if he still went out early, like sort of reflecting what I thought about him preseason. But again, the positivity and at least the potential for him to be a notable figure is enough to leave him here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, and again, we're continuing with this tier of people who I'm not really sure where their edit is going, but unlike the previous two people we talked about, I feel like this person is likely to make a deep run and less likely to be an early boot. And here we have Swati. And again, I'm not too sure what to make of Swati's edit so far. In the premiere, she has a confessional about being in the National Guard and how young women are often voted out early, and through that, she's determined to do her part in the challenges and around camp to prove her worth. She then gets an individual intro package where she talks about her education and her upbringing. She talks about being determined to prove her worth and work her way to the top. She later talks to Tori, tells Roxroy that she wants to vote out Zach. She has a confessional about how Zach gave up during the challenge, and ultimately she gets her way in voting out Zach. And overall, I am feeling okay about Swati so far. She does get that personal content with her intro package and potential storyline of her proving her worth and really being someone that values, the physical side of the game. And ultimately, this is followed up on where she explains that the reason she wants to get rid of Zach is due to him not pulling his weight, even though I'm not entirely sure how true that is, given that, they were pretty far behind by the time they actually got to the puzzle. But what really matters is the fact that, again, it goes through. Now, based on Zach's exit interview, he really trusted her and saw her as an ally, so her voting him out probably wasn't the best thing in the world. But again, we did see her talking to Roxroy as well, so I guess they are on good terms. So, and, yeah, I could take or leave, the actual decision about Zach, where on one hand, I feel like this notion of proving her worth is something that can be followed up on, and through her building relationships with people like Roxroy, right, someone that does care about building the shelter and working hard is, again, something that can build them on her storyline, and through that really help her edit. But on the other hand, I'm not sure if that's the best storyline to have, especially in this new era of the game, where, again, things like advantages and making big moves and doing the strategic stuff is really what's valued in modern Survivor. So her really latching on to these old school ideas of working around camp, improving your physical worth, while it does set her apart from these Parvati 2.0 figures that we've seen getting targeted early due to their strategic prowess over their physical worth and challenges. I feel like Swati could be in an interesting position. Now, like I said, I don't think she'll be an early boot by any means. I feel like she could be set up for a storyline that can make her a top contender, but I just need to see more. I'm not entirely sure whether this storyline of hers is a good thing or not, or whether it'll even be expanded upon. But for now, with this me being on the fence, I decided 8 was a decent spot to put her. Now we're moving on to number 7, and similar to Swati, I'm not really sure how meaningful this person's edit will be. However, from what we've seen so far, it seems pretty positive, although I'm a bit skeptical. And here we have Jenny, and I've been pleasantly surprised by Jenny so far. I feel like she's gotten a relatively good episode so far, but is it though? In the premiere, she has a confessional about the Savvy Challenge and how everyone has different ideas. She takes the lead in the challenge. In confessional, she talks about being a designer and is someone who is methodical. She notes how others are confused and feels the need to step up. Again, through that, she wins the challenge, winning supplies for her tribe. While she doesn't get too big of a pump for actually winning it, she is the ones who are narrating a lot of the challenge. Later on, she's picked to go on the summit due to drawing straws, has a confessional about the twist and wondering what it'll bring, and ultimately she chooses to protect her vote. And aside from that, that's it from her. Overall, I think Jenny has promise, though admittedly I'm not sold on her edit just yet. She gets a bit of personal content talking about her background and how that connects to the game. However, she says this while working on the Savvy Challenge, so you can argue that is a bit circumstantial. She also doesn't get that much content during the summit aside from her protecting her vote, though knowing what Drea and Marianne do, this ends up being the correct decision for her. And while we hear about her being a duo with Mike, we don't see a ton of that in this episode at least. So I'm kind of mixed over whether these things actually elevate Jenny's edit and how much of that will carry over into future episodes. However, I think the main thing boosting her in the power ranking is the fact that we just had Erica on 41 winning despite having a relatively quiet edit in the pre-merge, and despite her getting this spike in content due to things that appeared circumstantial at the time, like when Erica got sent to exile at the merge, leading into her proper introduction to the story. So again, there's some uncertainty there. And I feel like if Survivor 42 was edited in a similar way to Survivor 41, then I feel like that's something that really benefits Jenny. However, I'm just not too sure about that right now. Like, I still need to see what exactly they're doing. I want to see if Jenny is followed up on at all during the pre merge. And it'll be interesting to see whether we see her get into a solid position. Now, I actually think she probably will, but again, I really need to see. I really want to see how she does moving forward. And if she does step it up, then I feel like she can jump up on this power ranking. But for now, I feel like 7 is about as high as I can put her. Now we're moving on to number 6, and I feel like this person had a very interesting premiere. Not entirely positive, but certainly interesting. And here we have Roxroy. And like I said, Roxroy did get a bit of negativity in his premiere. Obviously, first up, he wins the reward challenge for the tribe, which is something. After the challenge, he's brought into the alliance with Drea and Romeo, talks to Romeo about how he doesn't see this as a vacation, which then leads into the storyline of him being bossy around camp, insisting they need to get work done and building the shelter and starting the fire. And through that, he has a confessional about how it's like herding cats getting these people on board. And obviously, we also get some negativity with people like Zach saying that Roxroy doesn't understand the game and how he's trying to be the leader in a position where he's probably going to be targeted as a result. And like I said, this is largely negative, except we see Drea then tell him to tone it down, and then he gets an intro package about how he's a stay-at-home dad. It's a different mindset from always being needed to being on Survivor, when obviously with people being adults, they don't need to be taught everything. And he admits that he'll need to be more adaptable. After the challenge, Drea and Tori do target him for being a weakness and for being bossy. However, by the end, like it doesn't really matter too much. He talks to Swati about the vote, has a confessional about how Zach is the weak link and how he wants to pick a plan and stick with it. And obviously, he does stick with the plan and voting out Zach. And overall, Roxroy definitely had an alright premiere. He is shown being included in the Drea Romeo alliance. It also seems he has a relationship with Swati, which is something. However, he does get that negativity with him bossing people around. However, I feel like while that is like some negative, and something that could put a target on his back moving forward, I feel like he is being set up for a storyline where he talks about needing to be adaptable and how he needs to grow and learn on Survivor. I think that's something that can be spun positively. So to where he will be a major character on the season. Obviously, on top of that, he does seem to be decently positioned for the time being in the alliance with Drea and Romeo. However, how stable that'll be moving forward remains to be seen. I do think he's pretty solid with Tori and Drea, so that's something at least. And like I said, I feel like the main reason he's this high is because of him being set up as this figure who, again, needs to grow on the show and be more adaptable and then slowly learn to play the game more. I think that also was illuminated when he was talking about how he wants to pick a plan and stick with it, which probably isn't the best mindset to have on Survivor, especially in a game where he needs to be adaptable. So I can see that also being a bit of a knock, but Roxroy is definitely someone I really want to see more of. And I'm curious to see if he'll really grow in the show and start to play the game more in the style of this new era. So again, because of that potential, I feel like 6 is a decent spot for him. Now we're moving on to number 5, and I can see this person being seen as too high on the list. However, I feel like they got just enough content without being overexposed, and here we have Drea. And I like Drea so far. I mean, in the premiere, she says that from the beginning, she's had to fight for people. She mentions her competitive spirit and how she's done hurdles, and she tends to bring that into situations. During the challenge, Lindsay, and Hai encountered their decision of getting the amulets. She has a choice of working with the others, and sure enough, she agrees to it. After the challenge, she's brought into the alliance of Roxroy and Romeo, tells Roxroy to calm down when he's bossing people around. She goes off to read the advantage, and turns out it's the advantage amulet, which she can use to morph into different advantages depending on how many are left in the game. Obviously, they can be used up until the final 6. And later on, she's picked to go on the summit where she talks about wanting to get an advantage and chooses to risk her vote, and through that gets the extra votes. So sort of insane how in the premiere she manages to get 2 extra votes basically, because the amulet is an extra vote when there are 3 left in the game. So she literally has 2 extra votes right now. She talks to Tori after the challenge about how Roxroy is a challenge weakness, which kind of contradicts her building the alliance with Roxroy and can be seen as a knock, but ultimately she comes around when Romeo pushes the Tory plan instead. And then eventually she votes out Zach. And overall, Drea seems alright to me. She got a good enough confessional during the intro, although it's not a formal intro package. We see her relationships with a decent chunk of the tribe, but especially with Roxroy and Romeo. And ultimately, she's able to peel Romeo away from Zach, securing his loyalty, which is a positive sign. On the other hand, we learned from Zach's exit interview that he was trying to target her, which isn't ideal, but it does explain why she ultimately votes out Zach at the end of the day. And like I mentioned earlier, she is loaded with advantages, having both an amulet and an extra vote, which is enough to make her a decent contender. And like I said, I feel like she got just enough content in the premiere to make her a notable figure, but definitely not overexposed. And admittedly, I could see her dropping off in the future, if I'm being honest. I mean, I am sort of highlighting this because I feel like, again, with plenty of other people being overexposed in the edit, I feel like she kind of stands out. And I feel like she has just enough to where if she is the winner, they can really feed that through to make it less predictable, sort of like with Jenny to an extent. But again, I can't have her all the way at the top. I feel like 5 has to be the place where she stands. And with that, we are now moving to the top 4. And to me, these seem like the top 4 for the time being. However, I'm going to be perfectly honest in that I don't think there's a clear frontrunner right now. I mean, while I will be talking about the merits of these top 4, either by their game position or by their edit, I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these people fell out of contention, like with subsequent episodes coming out. I'm just doing my best to parse together who I think could win the season. So again, I feel like in general, this list is quite susceptible to shifting around. And I mentioned that because number 4 is someone who a lot of people seem to like so far, and I like her as well, but I'm not entirely sure she's the winner yet. And here we have Marion. And again, Marion is a fun character, and people are already talking about how likable she is and how bubbly and full of energy she is. And we get plenty of that in the premiere, where during the intro, she says that in this moment, she wonders whether she'll enjoy the experience or she'll end up doing nothing and regretting it, which is a decent quote on its own. Jeff calls her out first. She talks about how excited she is to be on the show. During the Savvy Challenge, she has a confessional breaking down her thought process and how she's seen the different challenges, says it's difficult to keep track of how many triangles they've already counted, is one of the 3 to work on the challenge. After winning it, she has a confessional celebrating. Later on, she talks about how she wants to go on the summit, but fears she'll be put on the outs. She ultimately takes one for the team and goes on the summit. During there, she gets her intro package. She admits to struggling with self-esteem issues growing up, but she wants to be herself, chooses to risk her vote, and gets an extra vote as a result. And that's pretty much it for her. And overall, Marion is a very likable figure, and I feel like she'll be a big character in the season. Even so, I'm not sure if she's a top contender just yet. She talks about how the show is an experience, how she wants to make the most of it, and obviously gets that intro package. And I think there is a storyline for her to make a deep run, as I mentioned. However, I think the biggest downside for her is that her relationships haven't been made explicit. Now, it does seem she's close to Omar, and she seems well-liked. However, we did learn from Jackson's exit interview that her likability is already making her a big threat, and it sounds like she could have been the first boot had Taku gone to Tribal. And again, that probably is a positive for her in the sense that we didn't really see that in the edited show. It was more so through exit interviews, but still, it's not a great look for her in-game wise. While the medevac seems to benefit her, threat management will likely be an issue for her moving forward. And even beyond that, I worry that she may have gotten too much content in the premiere to where it'll be tough to see her as the actual winner. I mean, would the winner get this much content in the premiere? And like I said, I mean, I feel like she will be a big character on the season, which probably means she's in it for the long haul, but can she get all the way to the end? And I'm not sure right now. And again, we'll have to see what she's like in episodes 2 and beyond, but right now, I don't think she'll get all the way to the end. I feel like her threat management will be an issue throughout the season, and with her not having explicit relationships, there are still holes in her edit. So because of that, I have to leave her here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and we have someone who I view pretty similarly to Marianne in the sense that they had a pretty big premiere, had a lot of great stuff in it, and I'm sort of on the fence over whether they're just a big character or whether they're a serious contender. Mind you, I think they are leaning more towards serious contender, and here we have Mike. And I like Mike a lot. I was high on him in the preseason, and I feel like now he is proving to be a big character. In the premiere, he says in the intro that he's got one shot at this. Jeff calls him out during the intro. He talks about how excited he is to meet Jeff Probst. When asked what it'll take to win, he says it's a bit of everything and that you need to be well rounded. After the challenge, he has a confessional about how the game is real, has another confessional breaking down the savvy sweat twist. He fears he'll be picked to do the task and not get to build bonds. So he really lobbies to do the savvy challenge and he gets his way in the process. Is shown working around camp later on and people are impressed by his strength. He has a confessional about how people see him as tough and how it's important for him to soften that blow. He then gets an intro package about being a firefighter. He then starts the fire for his tribe. And again, this is all a pretty good premiere for him. Obviously, a big premiere which makes me feel mostly good about him, despite the preview for the next episode setting him as a potential target. However, I don't really hold too much weight in that, as again, I tend to believe that previews are a bit misleading. He talks on the mat about needing to be well-rounded, and considering I criticized Jonathan's edit earlier for him talking about being bad at mental challenges, this comment from Mike is a positive for me. He also gets the intro package and connecting that to his need to work past his tough exterior to connect with people. He gets plenty of positivity with him building the shelter and people appearing to accept him and being impressed by him. And while we don't hear from him himself, he is established being in a duo with Jenny, which I think will carry over. So there's plenty of positivity from Mike, and I think he has the right mixture of personal content and setting up a storyline to do well in the game. But like Marion, I do worry a bit that he was overexposed in the premiere, that he may be this big character that makes a deep run, but when push comes to shove, they do cut him in favor of a less predictable option. So I feel like this next episode and beyond is going to be very important for Mike's edit and for me seeing whether this is serious or not. So again, I want to put Mike higher, but I feel like 3 is as high as I can put him for now. Now we're moving on to number 2, and I can't believe this person is this high, and I'm questioning whether this pick is justifiable or not. I guess we'll see in the future, but for now, I have Romeo at number 2, and again, he had a solid episode. I mean, in the premiere, he proposes an alliance with Drea and Roxroy, has a confessional about his pageant coach background and how first impressions are everything, is fascinated by how successful he's doing so far. Zach talks about connecting with him, has a confessional about how Drea is turning on Roxroy and that he can't believe she's turning on him so quickly. He then pitches the Tory plan, has a confessional about how it doesn't make sense for him to get rid of Zach, but Swati and Roxroy want to keep around strength, and through that, Zach is voted out. And overall, I am liking Romeo quite a bit. His first confessional talks about his job and how it connects to the game, followed by him applying that to build connections. He builds the alliance with Drea and Roxroy, which feels like it'll be important moving forward. Through that, I think he's doing pretty well at positioning himself. Now, the one knock to his edit is that he doesn't get his way in the end. He has that confessional where he literally says that it makes no sense for him to vote out Zach, only for him to vote out Zach. And admittedly, there probably wasn't much he could have done anyway, but it's still not the best look. Even so, I like the fact that he's connecting to others on his tribe that seem to have longevity, particularly Drea and Roxroy. And I feel like his first confessional, wasn't too glaringly obvious at the end of the day. He does connect his job to his ability to play Survivor, but it's not as obvious as something you might have seen in the intro. So I feel like that is enough to elevate him this high into contention. And again, if he keeps it up, I can see him being number 1. But I feel like there is one other person that I feel like is a more conventional pick. And I guess you could say Romeo could still be number 1 for me. However, it's just so weird to think that he is number 1 for now, and I am wondering how much of this will carry over, especially with that knock to his edit of him not getting his way. So because of that, I do have to leave him here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I think is the most likely to win Survivor 42 right now is Omar. And honestly, I wasn't sure about putting Omar at number 1, as he does seem a bit of a conventional pick. He does seem like someone who has a similar issue as Mike and Marion in the sense that he does have a bit of a presence in this premiere. But in the premiere, he says that as an exotic veterinarian, you never know what to expect. He plans to come in as a pigeon, but will come out as an owl. Jeff mentions how Survivor 42 is different, prompting a confessional from him about how the game is different. While doing the Savvy Challenge, he's shown being the one in charge, is one of the 3 to work on the Savvy Challenge, has a confessional about how they need supplies to survive. After Jackson is medevac, he has a confessional about how difficult the game is. And overall, I am feeling good about Omar. Like I said, he has that pretty notable confessional in the beginning. Although, admittedly, it feels like a parody of Winter at Our Throats, if I'm being honest, with him somehow connecting exotic veterinarian with playing the game of Survivor and literally making a very similar analogy to Erica's Land to Lion storyline with pigeon to owl, which does feel a bit forced at the end of the day, but it is still a collection of winter edit tropes that is effective. And again, the fact that he got right in the intro is pretty good. And I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being an actual storyline this season. Beyond that, his premiere is pretty quiet, admittedly. However, he does get these confessionals talking about the game and certain thematic elements of the game, like just general profound stuff about Survivor. And I found it interesting how he was literally getting these at every opportunity, where I feel like normally they would try to spread these out across different people, especially people like Mariah and Lindsay, who got pretty quiet episode edits on the whole. But I found it interesting that all of them went to Omar at the end of the day. You know, it's sort of these things that makes him like not too obvious, you know, sort of to make you forget about his big confessional at the beginning, but just enough to where he is established to be an important character. Now, again, I think the major downside is that, again, his relationships aren't made that explicit. I mentioned the possible Marion connection, but aside from that, we don't really hear much from Omar's position on the tribe. Mind you, they don't go to tribal, so that's something at least. And again, I will have to see with Omar. Again, I feel like there isn't a clear frontrunner right now, but I feel like I just have the most evidence of Omar being number one right now to where he has enough there to set up a storyline, but not so obvious that he is someone who is a decoy or is just someone who will be a big character. Again, all this can change in the future, but I feel like for right now, after the premiere, Omar, to me, is the most likely person to win Survivor 42. And there we go, that will do it for this video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And like I said, I'll be back next week to cover episode 2 and beyond of Survivor 42. Very excited for that. On Monday, I'll be updating my Big Brother Canada power rankings. That's been a pretty fun season so far. Wednesdays are for Australian Survivor. I'm very excited to be covering that season so far. And like I said, there's a lot coming our way on this channel. I'm excited to cover all these shows. Stay tuned for that. But for now, that is the video. See ya.